Hit it.
Hey, welcome to the good life. All right. Yo, so it's been a little hiatus for us here. Chris held it down for us last week. We are here to talk about masculinity today, our own personal definitions, and probably comparing that a little bit to the definitions that are deemed very popular in today's society. See what we come up with, what we have different, what we have similar, what we all have in common with each other, and then also obviously the different definitions between what we think is masculinity and what society today thinks is masculinity. So I guess to go ahead and kick it off, let's go ahead and first by welcoming Kobi back to the West Coast. He was back home in our hometown of Richmond, Virginia, his second hometown. Correction.
How was it? How was the East Coast? Tell us.
Woo! Listen, it's too cold. Too cold, but
it's April.
It's too cold. You lived in Los Angeles, man. You know it's too cold. You know, and let me bring you in here, bam, and but it was great to be.
Did you get mine, by the way? Because I'm not on our Instagram yet.
Oh, there you are.
Ooh.
I don't know who that is, but
it's clearly Stu.
How's that?
Better. We're good to go. I thought we were good to go.
All right. Yeah, so getting the wires freshened up, getting everything cleaned up. East Coast was great. Not because it was just the East Coast, but it was great to have a change of environment. It's great to see family, be with family. You know, as you guys know, I'm the oldest of 5. You know, my siblings are like, you know, my family, my immediate family is everything to me because we moved over here. I pretty much like everybody over in Ghana was, you know, kind of stayed over there. So it was just like my immediate family and I. So we're getting really close, and also working with, you know, being so much older than them is kind of like, you know, almost like an uncle situation sometimes. So it's really cool, man, to see them go through different stages, you know, to see like them doing so well and crushing it, really holding the Asare banner high. So that was probably my favorite part, seeing my youngest brothers play basketball out there, putting a hurting on these folks, man. I was like, man, my brother doesn't need to hear this, but I can't hang with that guy no more, man. He's out here holding his days up. And so I said, well, you better put that down. And then my middle brother's doing great. He's doing great running track. But my sister is fantastic, just turning 21. So it's all good, man. All good.
A lot of athletes in the family, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a lot of all the boys are athletes, you know. My sister was in like yoga. She's more into the arts and crafts now. So yeah, a lot of athletes, she's great musician, plays guitar.
That's dope, man. And it's always good, right? It's always good to get like you said, back on the farm, right? Back to the farm, just back to the roots, back to, you know, again, hence why we do this show, right? The Good Life. Health, wealth, love, happiness, relationships are so incredibly important. How we are interacting with our family members and the people around us, it's so incredibly important, right? Like rebuilding those relations, catching back up, like that's the true wealth of life, right? It's fellowship. So yeah, Stu, I think that's still you, man. I don't know. Is it? Yeah, because I
don't know why it's not working.
Because when you mute, you're good. But
you know what? How about, is there a way, what if I were to let you guys lock it down on Instagram? I don't know if that would work or not, would it?
Yeah, that's fine. See if you, how about now?
Well,
there we go.
How are we now?
You're good now, brother.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'll let you guys do the majority of the talking tonight on Instagram for that.
No, we're still here live on Facebook, live on LinkedIn, live on YouTube. By the way, press the thumbs up, share this thing, subscribe, like do all that type of stuff, because this information, hopefully it's helping some of you. Hopefully you're picking up some of these nuances and things that we have to start paying attention to, shifting our focus towards, and or shifting our focus away from. in order to live the good life, right? In order to get to that place that we are living the life that we design and not was designed for us. So yeah, hit that thumbs up, share this with a friend. Tonight, Stu, reintroduce that topic. What are we talking about tonight?
Masculinity. So basically our definitions of masculinity, each on our own. And then also masculinity is what like society typically labels it as or defines it as. So I guess just to go ahead and kick it off, I'm only going through the StreamYard right now, but that's okay. So to kick it off, you know, I think my definition of masculinity comes down to, I think the first like fundamental is authenticity and the belief in oneself to like observe, identify, and then speak the truth. And then after that, I would say I personally define it as protecting those that are very important to me. I think that protecting, you know, the family, not that I'm trying to say that we should only be doing this as the guy. I think that it's a combination of things, but I think that is inherently something that I want to be in a position to do, is protect and support the family would be like the number 2 and 3s there. But I think probably as we begin to like dive into the definition more, I think the ability to like take all of those things and lead by example and go beyond just thinking about your immediate family that you're looking after, but also thinking about like the greater community at large. And I think finding a way to adapt in society where you're not necessarily pushing somebody down to elevate yourself up, all of that, like that combination of staying humble, truthful, and basically providing growth, I think is the best way I could put it, to both your immediate family, yourself, and the community around you. So I think that's my first guess at it.
That's big, man. That's big. It's weird when we started talking about this topic, right? And we were kind of powwowing on, you know, what does it mean to be a man? It's like, you know, who knows? Like, how do we define that? I've always defined it as like the provider, the person, whether it's head of household, whether it's head of family, whether it's leader in society. And again, not saying that, you know, women can't be these things, but at the end of the day, I've always looked at the man's role as, you know, somebody that's able to produce, to right, provide, to go, to do those types of things in any situation, in any scenario. But I don't know that like I tie myself up or hold myself to some, like, if I don't do this, I'm not a man. That's the other side of it though, right? Like, I don't know that there's some clear cut definition that I would even have where I would then start to say, well, that's not manly, or I wouldn't do that, right? Like, just me thinking about maybe some stereotypes or things that we might hear a bunch. You know, I don't work with my hands at all. Like, I don't, it's a very funny dynamic in my household. I've joked about it. I've put it on social before. My wife does all of the heavy lifting around the house. Just real talk. Like, she does the garden stuff. She fixes stuff. Like, she's climbing on the ladder. Like, that's her. It's not my thing. I don't fix cars. I don't do any of this stuff. Right? None of that. So if that was my definition of being a man, then I wouldn't live up to, right? Like, I wouldn't be a man because I don't do any of that stuff. But that's not my definition of being a man, right? Like, that's why it's like, it's more, you know, it's tough. It's tough to really put kind of a label on it because we do so much, or I feel like we need to provide so much, or, you know, be many different things in many different situations to many different people. I'm curious to hear you, Kobi. What's going on?
Well, you know, I think I'll start by saying this. I think you the quality of your answer is based on the quality of the question. And I think maybe we got to go back a little bit and take a couple of steps backwards and look at what we're trying to do here. All right, we're trying to put a label on things. And by doing that, I think you're thus going to get a certain quality of answer, right? Quality or scope, or however you want to define it, not to place the good or bad on it. But and so I'll kind of shy away from that a little bit and not answer, you know, what is because I don't know. I think it's contextual. I think it's heavily contextual. So we're taking, I would almost define it more of like a role as defined by this societal context, and then fill in the blanks, right? Because that's really what we're dealing with here when we're talking about that. And I think that's really not, it's where we get into a lot of the contradictions, right? Well, I don't do any of those things, but you know, I have this. So I think we got to be careful. Like, what are we looking at? Societal role? Are we looking at biological function? Are we looking at, you know, masculine, feminine traits? I think they're probably more, but I think those three right there are even more different. One, you're playing a role in society. The other, you are, you know, biologically functioning as one or the other. And then the other, you're more so like, we all have feminine and masculine traits. We're just expressed at different times based on the context that we're in, right? So I think that's where we get tripped up, is that we try to put an all-encompassing label on something that can't really function like that, because it's inherently has to be part of a whole. We can't separate it and think we're going to get just a stagnant answer to the question, you know. So you might say, well, all right, then answer the question. What is it, right? And I say it's all of those things at the same time. It's all of those things at the same time. It's heavily, you know, and so that's why we have to be, I wouldn't say careful, but we have to be open-minded in terms of how we're going about this. And so let me take the more so the traits as exist in both. As they exist in all of us at the same time. I think we all have varying degrees of each, and they have to be expressed at different times. So when we try to fit it all into societal roles where because you biologically function as a man, cannot express feminine traits, right? That's where we get plugged up and we get locked up, and then we get pigeonholed and we get trapped, and we feel like we're out of place. And I think those things exist for all, you know, regardless of your personal identification. I think those things kind of exist for all, because we're trying to fit things that don't fit. What do you guys say to that?
It's huge. That's huge. I'm curious, and Stu, jump in on this one. Like, how did we get to toxic masculinity as a society? Where did that come from? Like, where did this term come from?
What is that?
Yeah,
y'all got to fill me in. What is that?
Well, it's Stu, jump in, because it's a very widely used term, but I'm sure it's taken many different contexts according to who's using it. So Stu, talk about that side of this label, I guess you could say, right? Toxic masculinity.
Yeah. Well, I love that topic, but first I want to go ahead and say that I love the level of specificity you just went to, Kobi. For real. I think they're between the biological, the masculine and feminine energy, and societal roles, there's three very different conversations there and three very different definitions. So thank you for clarifying. And as far as toxic masculinity, I think that kind of gets to the fundamental essence of why I love this topic of masculinity, because to me, I have my definition and I see what I think is society's definition, at least what I've been exposed to. And to me, toxic masculinity is over-reliance on masculine energy without exploring, learning to understand the feminine energy that is in not only you as a human being, whether you're male or female, but also in your partners and family members and friends, etc., and other people in the world. And then I think, so not recognizing that you have both of those traits and having almost an imbalance, or I don't want to say imbalance, because that implies that 50-50 is the way to go. I think that harmony would be the best way to put it. That's been a theme before.
Yeah.
So if you have the right harmony of masculine and feminine energy, then I think that's where you're able to really transition back and forth, like Kobi was saying, depending on what the circumstances, depending on if we're talking about in a relationship, depending on where your partner's at and what their needs are right now. And so so taking it out of like the very high level definition of like masculine and feminine energy, I think the other thing is societal. You know what? I like, Kobi, I like that you structured this like this, man. I think to start with the energy one, I've defined that one. When it comes to societal roles, very, very linear thinking as the man, as the financial provider of the household, and not necessarily as the hands-on caretaker of the children. And I think the third piece of that is the way that it is almost deemed popular to be extremely competitive, but not necessarily cooperative and coexistent with other men. So I think that that is the societal role piece. Yeah, I think that's all I got on that. I'd be really curious to hear what you guys think about toxic masculinity based on what I just mentioned.
Sounds right to me. Not right to me, but I like that you went to the harmony piece of it, because I think that is exactly what my brain was also heading in, that we line these things up like you are biologically this, thus you are, you know, spiritually energy this, and also you should function this way in society. Well, and that's not true. And very rarely all those things line up, right? And even if they do, is that a forced thing, or is that what works for the actual person, right? So I think it's something definitely we got to keep there's something to that. Now I'm just hearing it from you for the first time, from both of you guys for the first time. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, well, that's right. I gotta dig a little bit deeper to understand what the essence of it is. But based on what I heard, harmony of those two energies is key. And when we're not in harmony, I think it results in dis-ease, in a lot of ways. So yeah,
that's it. That's good. Give those three again, Stu. That could be just said, like the
biological, masculine and feminine energy, societal roles.
Yeah. So when I think of that word toxic, right, and hitting on those points and kind of understanding, I think a lot of it comes down to those societal roles, but it probably has to do with all three, just like you said. And I'm probably just again just reiterating what you guys just said. Like it becomes about harmony. It becomes about the balance or harmony of all those, and seeing them not so black and white. I think that has a lot to do with how we're perceiving people or things or men or whatever we're talking about. People make it very black and white. And I think, again, there's a lot of gray area. Take that societal roles, just take household roles. I just mentioned about my wife doing a lot of the heavy lifting. What I didn't mention is I like to do the dishes and cook, right? Like I prefer those things. I do it well, right? I went to school for that. So that didn't define me being more of a man or less of a man in the context of my home, but in society might be different, right? People's idea of kind of what should be done is different for everyone. But again, you guys kind of hit the nail on the head with it. I don't really have much else to it. It really is about that harmony of those things.
I think it's important to point out too, Chris, thanks for bringing that home on that. It seems like we definitely see eye to eye on that. I think really also bringing it, driving on the point or highlighting that it really is fluid, in the sense like it's fluid throughout history. It's fluid throughout different cultures. It's fluid throughout different times, right? What you're describing, Chris, for example, I mean, I think about, let's think about more North Africa, for example, or even further back. Let's think like Moorish Kingdom, right? Those societal roles were actually swapped, right? There's also examples of plenty of other societies that you have the roles swapped, and even the qualities in terms of the energy that is expressed in the what appears to be a biological female, right? It's like, oh wait, y'all do everything. Oh, okay. So it's also fluid in the sense that I think when we get stuck in our definitions is when we have issues. We have issues because we're hitting up against, oh wait, this doesn't fit, blah, blah, blah. And then instead of being fluid, instead of being willing to be open-minded and see beyond what we've been told, I think we, myself included, often kind of get stuck in that. And what's Stu, I love to hear your take on this a little bit too, man, because what's really kind of sad often is that becomes tremendous, like a battle that we don't, as men especially, we don't share, right? So we kind of have.
What specifically becomes a battle that men don't share?
So maybe that alignment, right? In that, whether it's alignment with what society says we should be, based on the physical vessel that we're in, or how it's right. So when you don't fit, right, it causes, I think, great cognitive dissonance, and some, that blockage or that discord that never really gets resolved, right? That's what do you think on that? Get your thoughts on that.
Man, I think you're absolutely right, because it comes down to a discrepancy, like you're saying, a discrepancy between what society is telling you should be based on your biology, and then there's who you want to be based. Not necessarily even based on your biology. That who you want to be is actually very much independent of your biology. There's a lot of influencing factors, like different sizes of like items in your brain, different reproductive organs, different hormones at different period of times in life because of those things. But you can still make choices that are not necessarily, as you're mentioning, like predisposed to biological male. It's not like some like factory that just sends you in one direction or the other. So I think to expand on, like, I guess to really bring that full circle, like you asked, like, is that like a main struggle, or is that like the main struggle? And I think it really is, man. I think that may be one of the fundamental struggles in identity that people face is we grow up and there's very strict societal roles expected of you depending on the culture which you're raised. And like you said, it changes all around the world. It could even change from one part of America to another part of America. Different religions, different nations. I think for me, just because I'm such a science geek and I love evolution, you also see it in the animal kingdom. Different animals take drastically different roles. What is it? Praying mantises like just bite the head off of a male? Like what? Like that's a societal thing. Like we're just going to casually do that. It actually helps them finish that reproductive process. But I just like pointing that out because I really do. Yeah, I really do think that you're right. You're hitting the nail on the head, man. Like people are expected to be something they're not just because of their biology. I think more often than not.
That's just a great conversation, right? Like, how do we break that? How do we break that? Right? Like, how do we break that because you were born here, look this way, do that you have to be this way? Is this something that society, like we can break in society? Because I think that's a big, like, again, we can point to lots of different things about that. We're talking about kind of masculinity right now, but like that is the issue. That is, like you said, it's the core part of like, why do I have to be a certain way in order to live, in order to feel like I'm a part of society, or right, that I feel good about my life, or I feel good about myself? Why do I have to live to that standard? Is that just because of, society? Is like, what do you guys think on that?
So how do we, what I heard is, how do you break the pattern, or how do you interrupt the pattern?
Because honestly, like if we're going to talk about this being one of the underlying issues with masculinity, with understanding who we are and kind of how we operate in the society we're in, how do we change the narrative, right? Because that's what we're talking about. Like we're trying to change this narrative so you can be whoever you want to be. So it's okay from a societal role, or from, right, just the role in your household, or whatever it is. How do we change that narrative?
I think, sorry, go ahead.
No.
Thanks. I think for me, the number one fundamental thing is parenting and explaining to your child that it's okay for, first of all, you to be who you want to be. Just be like, we're not going to sit here and tell you who you should be because of your biology. It's up to you. We're not going to place all these expectations of, this obviously isn't one of the biggest ones, but pink and blue just to start. We're not going to go down this whole track of, you're the boy, you're getting into sports. You're the girl, you're getting into something creative. No, we're not going to do that. Like, what do you enjoy? Let's expose you to both, and just kind of encourage that open-mindedness. And then I think the rest of it just comes like a better understanding in society that there should be flexibility, because not just the parents have influence over our kids.
Very true. That was literally the point I was about to say. You guys know I have a young daughter. She's about to turn 4. She already understands certain gender things that I've had to try to get her to unlearn. Right? Like just yesterday. This isn't like a huge thing, but it is something, right? Just yesterday, she was trying to play with me, or we were having playtime or something like that, and she said, like, you're the warrior and I'm like the princess or something like that. And I was like, why don't you be the warrior? You can be the warrior. And she was like, no, you're the boy. You're the warrior. And I was like, no, you haven't heard of Xena, warrior princess? Like, she was a real princess and a warrior. I know. Yes. I was like, she's a real, and obviously my daughter has no idea who that is. But I was just making the point, like, if you want to be a warrior, you can be a warrior. Like, there's nothing that says that you can't. But in her early stages, she's learned that, like, this is for men and this is girls. Like, this is boys, this is girls. And I think, just like you said, Stu, like, that influence comes very early. And I don't know if it comes from, I probably know it comes from Disney and all the other things that she consumes, that she gets these pictures and images. But yeah, parenting, it's our job to get her to unlearn those things very quickly and address them as they come up. And I think that's a huge part of it. So yeah, I follow.
That's hilarious, man. But it's so spot on, because we do this like right from the beginning, like before the beginning, right? And even if you as a parent do not want to participate, you're almost forced into it, right? Kind of like a lot of ways that society forces you into doing some things that you don't want to participate in, right? We'll talk about that another night. But I think we have to really pay attention to societal pressure. That's really what we're talking about, because dominant pressure or narrative is pushing in one direction. And if you as a parent, you as whatever, try to stand against it, it's really hard to stand alone, because you're like, I don't want to do the whole gender thing. But what do you, right? Grandparents are going, what do you mean? Right? In-laws are going, what do you mean? I want to stand, right? Everybody around you is all right. So there's this is that dominant narrative, that push, even though your gut's telling you something else, even though your heart's telling you something else, even though you've taken in new information and you want to do different for yours, there's still that noise, there's still that noise everywhere. And it's so interesting, because it's really difficult to take that stand. It's actually a lot easier to just go with it. Mm-hmm. It's actually just a lot easier to just go with it. And which is why I will add to the conversation and say my way is looking at more so teaching what I would call more so inner engineering to the child. Right. So teaching the child how to inner engineer their own sense of peace, their own sense of wherein that you child don't need to necessarily fight the current to feel whole, but you also don't need to go with the current to feel whole either. Right. So and I know that may sound kind of like, okay, well, which one? The whole point is that you don't have to be pro or anti. You don't have to be this extreme or that extreme.
You can do you. You can do you. Like, that's the purpose,
right? And yep. And I think that's the piece. Really, really doing that inner engineer and teach it, because you can't just teach it once with gender, because then you got to teach it with something else. You got to teach it with something else. But if you teach that go upriver to the source, which is that inner engineering, right? Which is that things happen, kids make decisions about themselves, or we pick that on along the way. I think that's kind of the way. What do you guys have to add to that?
First of all, that's huge. I could take this to a full parenting conversation. I know you guys aren't in that realm just yet, but this is 1,000% what's happening in my life, real time. Like, you know, I'll be transparent about it. Like, me and my wife, like, my daughter is about to turn 4. We literally had a conversation. She was under the impression that, like, we were going to throw a big party, and I was like, why are we doing that? That's not something I want. I know society says, like, when they're babies, like, throw these like themed parties and that's fun and they get to, but I'm like, that's not what I want, because that leads to massive sweet 16s. That leads to people being 30 years old and think they have to take off a whole month of work because their birthday is so goddamn special, right? It's not. Like, it's the day you were born. It's great, but like, you don't have to like take off the whole month for it. Like, these are things that start to like rub me the wrong way in society, but I understand how they got that way. It's because parents were feeding into the narrative of like, well, this is what we do, right? We throw parties, right? We invite all that, right? We want them. It's like, yeah, no, we don't have to, because, and same thing with holidays and Christmas, and like, she shouldn't get 40 gifts from everybody. Like, she should get one, and that's it, right? Because
all right, old Grinch.
I'm just saying.
I know what you're talking about, dude.
If we're gonna have the conversation, there's no Santa. Like, who's having that conversation with their 4-year-old? Like, I would love to, right? Like, I let her watch this stuff, but like, very clear, like, Santa is not coming down the chimney. Because I believe if you start lying to your children early, like, that is also a pattern. Like, these are all things that are okay by society standards. That, like I said, I could turn this into a full-fledged parenting conversation. But because we're talking masculinity.
I love it.
But anyway,
I love it.
You got me dying over here, man. I mean, you are on point with it. On point with it. Speaking of masculinity and also the point that you just came off with, Chris, let me just add that perhaps this might be we got 3 guys on the screen here, all the green. All the green.
We got female energy on here for sure.
So if we did, let's pretend for a second, do we think that there would be a little bit of a pushback to this, to exactly what you just said?
Probably.
Absolutely.
Probably. It was pushback from my wife, right? Like, it wasn't that smooth conversation. I'm just getting a chance to voice it now. But like, yeah, that was in a...
This is therapy for you.
Yeah, it is good, guys. I appreciate you.
Great observation there, because there are cultures that take birthdays and stuff even more seriously than ours does. And I think you got a great point. There's always some expectation of one-ing up the last birthday or the last significant milestone birthday. And as far as the fact that we automatically just just to focus on the masculinity piece real quick, you're absolutely spot on when you're talking about theme parties. I mean, that is like at a very early age, like, this guy is getting all these like masculine. I literally had this conversation yesterday, buying a birthday gift for a 1-year-old between me and my girl, and I honestly didn't really think much of it at the time. We just went with the boy thing. And now that we're talking about it here, it's such a great example of how, starting at 1, he's already being sent in one direction, and the girl that was born like close to the same time as him, who he's going to grow up side by side with, she's being sent in a totally opposite direction. What does that do for like future relationships between males and females in our society? It automatically, at 1 year old, we're just sending them in like, hey, these are the things you do, and these are the things you do, miss. I don't even know. Obviously, this 1-year-old wasn't asked like, hey, what do you want for your birthday theme to be? But like, if we allow some type of more neutral thing to where they get to an age where we could say like, hey, if you're gonna have a birthday party, number of gifts to be determined on a previous conversation. But if you're gonna have a birthday party, what do you want it to be? What do you want the theme to be? Instead of us kind of steering you in a direction. I think you kind of get into some of those conversations at 4 and 5, but at the same time, is that 4 or 5-year-old even mature enough to make that decision?
No, because
based on everything else they've been influenced by.
Yeah, no, because they've been watching Disney for the majority of their life, right? Like, like I'm as a parent, like I just see what Disney does. Love them as a company, but they do a great job of marketing. Listen, like you can't take away the business prowess of the Disney conglomerate. They've done an amazing job from a business standpoint of like how they reach people, how they tell stories, how they get into our minds, how they continue to move their business forward. But that's exactly what it is. That I'm not again, I may not agree with what they're saying, but I can look at what they're doing. Because think about it, just from a business perspective, if we could hypnotize people into the right stuff, kudos to us, right? They just have figured out how to do it to the masses with things that maybe we don't agree with. But at the end of the day, back to that comment, like that my daughter would probably want some type of princess pink something, and not because I've introduced it, but because the thing she's watching has introduced that to her.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that we got onto this topic of like consumption, because it obviously plays to cut the noise and follow the money so well. And you said somewhere in there, like, if we could hypnotize them to the right thing. And what's interesting is Walt Disney, based on how he thinks and the environment he grew up in, he constructed Disney, this massive locomotive, to go in his direction of the right thing. And only recently have there been films coming out, such as Mulan or other things that kind of challenge it a little bit. But Mulan's not even perfect. I could actually go into that. But what's interesting is, like, should they even be hypnotizing to begin with? Because how do you know your definition of right is correct? Actually, Kobi, that's something you told me like a year ago. So tossing that up there for y'all.
Kobi's dancing because he's trying to talk. So I see him brewing.
I'm also trying to decide which direction is appropriate to go in right now, because there's so many directions you can take it in. Yeah. Right. A few things to point out. First and foremost, that that we are all acknowledging there is hypnotizing taking place, period. Right. That's not necessarily a problem. It's just like that is happening. Right. OK, cool. And if that is happening, then what are they hypnotizing with? Ladies and gentlemen, Disney's not the first to do this. They got their stories from somewhere. Right. Pinocchio came from somewhere. Snow White came from somewhere. Right. It all comes from somewhere. And that it just tells us how deep these stories goes. Goldilocks. Right. The Hansel and Gretel, like, stories about children have not been positive, or they appear positive, but have been layered with quite deep, disturbing information for quite a long time. And I think, this is not lost to any of us, right? Ring Around the Rosie, right? Like, this stuff has been happening for quite a long time.
I think everyone doesn't know this type of stuff, though.
Yeah.
Oh, my fault. See,
I think we do, but
we might.
Yeah, I don't think everybody is.
Okay. Yeah. This is the mistake I often make, is that I have been analyzing this for so long that I skip steps. All right, I skip steps. Mm-hmm. Well, are you familiar with what Ring Around the Rosie, for example, is? Like,
I think we all know the song, right? Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down.
Okay, so that's not necessarily a positive thing. Not to mention, okay, so let's go to Hansel and Gretel real quick. They get lost in the woods, they get cooked, they get eaten. Like, this is what's happening to children. Like, either this is what's happening to children, this is it's being projected to children, or this is whatever it is. On some level, it's a little weird. On some level, the bagpiper, right? He comes into and plays music for the children, but truthfully, he's playing music so the children follow him, and then he walks them outside the village, and then they all get kidnapped. All right, Pinocchio, they get kidnapped to the little island, and there's literally a scene in Pinocchio where they construct a sign to lie and get them drunk and kidnap these kids. Like, it's all been. The bottom line is there's always been a vested interest in controlling the minds of children. Period. for whatever it may be. And Disney is just the most current to do that, and to do that quite well, as you pointed it out.
And the probably the most profitable at doing it, because they figured it out, right? They figured out exactly how to do it. Again, I'm seeing this firsthand, just observing what's happening in my own household. So right there.
And to add real quick, I think another thing to point out is that the hypnotizing does not stop once you get out of childhood. In fact, we were all hypnotized in a particular way, whether we know it or not. In fact, we probably don't know it. And it never stops. In fact, it gets more intense. I say this, as babies, we're actually born into the world whole and perfect. The feet are perfect. The bones are great. Like, the body is fantastic. They have the highest level of white blood cells. Like, the babies are doing really great. Right. And then the world just kind of like pummels and lumps them up so that they fit and are all lumpy like us. Right. They're all you're not messed up enough. And we just like beat them into submission and like give them problems, self-esteem problems, and give them all this stuff so they fit into the world. Right. Both on a physical level, like if we fed babies correctly and never fed them the foods that we like and we eat, for example, they would move different. But I like fried chicken and fries. He's going to like fried chicken and fries, right? I like this. Oh, he's going to like that. We're just passing our mistakes on to our children. I think it's something to really look at on all levels.
Yeah. I think my other favorite example, by the way, it could be, I haven't told you this, I got the insert correctos on point, dude.
Oh,
yeah. So like, just like he's talking about, like, even if it's not just the nutritional side of the physical, Kobi's also, and Squat University was also getting me behind this, like shoe wear and how that messes you up. And you're first of all, you're disconnected from the earth. You can't ground yourself. Second of all, you can't even stand properly. So automatically, we basically just take our kids, and we're all familiar with, I want to say Korean, but I'm not sure. It's some Eastern Asian ancient practice of binding a woman's foot, and just so she looks more attractive. There's actually like some really dark reasons why they did that I don't even feel comfortable bringing up here on this channel. But I think the first one is just so they had smaller feet and they looked more attractive. But there's some kind of more sinister ones there. Anyways, fear was the common element in every one of the items you just mentioned as far as the different shows. Like they're immediately introducing fear. You're a child, you should be scared. Now, naturally, in the wild, children are more scared. They want to go back to their parent, but they don't have all these ridiculous stories that plant seeds in their mind that they could get like hypnotized and kidnapped and all other kinds of stuff. Like it's just be eaten or not eaten. Stay next to your dad. It's that simple. That's what biology and evolution taught us, and they made it like way, way, way more suppressive.
You hit the nail on the head, Stu. I was gonna say it anyway, but it's fear. It's fear. Napoleon Hill wrote a book called Outwitting the Devil. Outwitting the Devil. Listen to this book a bunch of different times. In there, he says something that we're talking about. He talks about the hypnotic rhythm that the enemy puts you under. That's literally the words that he uses, the hypnotic rhythm. And just like you said, Kobi, like it starts as a child, but then we grow up and we're in a hypnotic rhythm our day to day, right? 98% of what we do is habitual anyway. So the way we wake up, what we do, how we move, right? All that stuff becomes our hypnotic rhythm. And we don't understand how to break that. But to your point, this comes from being a child, right? Like they're getting into this. That's where fear comes in, right? I used to be around a bunch of people that like we would, no fear, like just cut this fear stuff out. Like, and when you become a parent, right, there's like a balance. It's like, I see my daughter standing on this ledge. I don't want her to be scared to fall off, but I have to let her know that it's real, right? This is a real danger potentially. So like, how do you balance that by not just like consuming them with all these fear tactics? But that's a lot of what they've been hearing. A lot of those stories that you mentioned could be like, they're fear based. Back to, in my household last year, maybe, I think last year, no, the year before, I think when my daughter was like 2 or 3, yeah, she was like, I think she was 2 or 3, whatever. But I had a real problem with Halloween and the images she was seeing around Halloween time that she was attracted to. Like there's some guy, right, with Steve and Maggie. Those of you that have kids, you might know who that is, Steve and Maggie, right? Like they make these, it's a bird and a guy, and they like have these like fun conversations and songs, but like they had like 4 hours worth of Halloween content of like this scary, spooky stuff. And my daughter's talking about witches for 2 months. And I'm like, what are you talking about right now? And then I realized that's where it came from. And again, those are just the things that get put into their mind so early that aren't introduced by us. But how do you shield them from it? It's that pushback against society. Like, am I going to be the dad? Are we going to be the parents? That's like, my kid doesn't participate in any of this stuff. Like none of it. Like, yeah, you might see kids out there doing it. That's not going to be you. And then how do we continue to go down that path and right? You know, this is the struggle of parenting, by the way. Like this is what I deal with and my wife deals with, because, you know, we want to raise healthy, you know, a great, you know, person in society. But at the end of the day, pushing back against the societal norms that we know are false anyway makes their life harder.
Yeah, it does.
That's it, right? So that's such a balance, such harmony, right? Like we really got to figure that side out, but glad we can have the conversation about it. So jump in, Kobi. I know you had something.
I was just listening, man. I was just listening, honestly. You know, I do think it is important to also kind of acknowledge that if you are in a particular context, there's but so much shielding and whatever you want to call it that you can do, right? Because you kind of give that up to be in a societal context. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, and this is why, you know, we're slowly moving, you know, more and more people into the city, more and more media, more and more like that type of stuff. I mean, we've been moving in that direction forever, right? But there's also a reason why some people are like, whoa, slow down, whoa, hold back, right? There's a reason why a lot of parents don't jump at the opportunity to raise their kids in the city rather than in like, you know, the suburbs or in the country or something, right? There's a reason for all this stuff. And I think at the end of the day, you as an individual, you as a family unit, you're going to have to decide what type of life do you want to construct? Because that's really all. I mean, you're not about to shield anybody from anything for too long. So what type of lifestyle do you want to live, and how do you want to construct that, and sit down and come to an agreement where two or more can actually come to an agreement. You can make anything happen. And now if you got a kid, then it means you got three. So whippity do, like, let's go. You know?
Whippity do. That's right. No, but yeah, like I follow 1,000%, and it's true. Like back to the purpose of this show for everybody that's watching. The purpose of the show, it's called The Good Life for a reason. Is because these are the things we have to start to iron out if you want to design your ideal life. If you want to design the good life for you, you have to pay attention to these things that you're either for or against, or, you know, just how you put this into perspective for your children, for your family. You know, we started this conversation about, you know, masculinity and being the head of a household. You know, I think that, you know, as a man being a head of a household, you set a precedence, right? You say, hey, this is kind of the life I think that we should move towards, you know, and then you start to implement those things. You start to make the necessary changes. You start to take in the necessary information, push away the other things that you don't want. And this comes down to all these areas when it comes to your nutrition. Like, just like you said, could be like, you know, I'm so much more aware of what we're feeding our daughter because I'm aware of what I'm putting into my body, right? And because I have that awareness, I'm very much so now aware, and I've always been, but even more so aware of that side because of the life I want to create for us as a family, right? happens in your money. It happens in your relationships. It's just you getting to that place to say, this is the life that I want. These are the things I'm willing to not do. And these are the things I will push against or move away from. And these are the things I will move towards in order to get to that life. And I think that's what it comes down to.
Yep. Man, I love how you kind of brought us back right there, because I couldn't agree more. I think you guys are both talking about just how difficult it is to separate, like, because to me, what we're really talking about here, I meant to bring this up earlier, is we're talking about someone's own uninfluenced choice to be themselves versus conformity. I think on this particular issue, what we're really talking about as the theoretical enemy is conformity. I think everybody has the opportunity to stand up and say, like, these are the things that I personally believe are advantageous, beneficial, quote unquote, right, the right thing to do. This is what I think we should do. It's when people start to get shady and do things behind the scenes that influence you in ways that you are not aware of, that is unfair. You're not telling someone your agenda. A really modern day example that happens a lot of times is if you set the meeting for one thing, or you say you want to have a conversation about one thing, and you come in with a totally different agenda. But this time, it's not just a different agenda that you brought to the table. You're doing it in a way that person doesn't even know about. You're leading them somewhere that they have no voluntary control of. You're hijacking their identity. And I think that's like, we talk a lot about, successful people in today's society. In my opinion, and from what I hear from a lot of folks, successful people pay attention to the details. These are details that you should absolutely at least consider from our conversation paying attention to. Because no matter what our specialty is, we all agree that some of this stuff is happening. So just allow yourself to pay attention to details. Be bold enough just to question what everyone around you is saying is okay, because you should be a critical thinker.
That's huge. You should be a critical thinker, yet we're all in this hypnotic rhythm, right? And it takes you away from critical thinking because you're in a rhythm that you don't have to think about. It leads to all of the problems in society, right? It leads to all the problems. So yes, this show is getting you to become more of a critical thinker. Let's pose some of these questions. Let's talk about some of these things so you don't have to just go with the flow, right? You don't just have to, well, I see them doing it. They say it's okay. You really are taking in information and like qualifying that information. Who is it coming from? Do I believe in this? Is this really what I want? Is this getting me in that heading in the direction I want to go? Right? Too often, you're right. Most people don't take in and actually think about the things that they're listening to, the things they're consuming, and then the actions that they're taking with that information. So I think it's critical. Conformity. I think that is our enemy, right? I feel like conforming is part of the issue. Again, just got to change the narrative. People have to be more aware, right? We got to be more aware. So,
honestly, I would just say, I don't know if it's necessarily, or maybe let me add, in addition to changing the narrative, in addition to doing, I think it's really on an individual basis, questioning our assumptions, right? Questioning it is easy to continue in the path that you see so many people going down. And I think really, it really does comes down to just take a minute to interrupt the pattern. Take a minute to check. Like, I've done this 100,000 times and it's worked most of the time. I'm not looking for necessarily what is wrong in this situation. I'm looking for what could improve, right? So I think really taking a minute to question that is always beneficial, whether it's in your health, whether it's in your mental patterns and ideologies that you've accepted to be true, whether it's in your money patterns, whether it's in your relationship patterns. Like, take a minute to question, yes, since however long they've been pushing this propaganda out there, we've known breakfast to be a particular way, right? But take a minute to question that. And in fact, what you'll find when you look is that, you know, an individual was paid to make us believe and agree on what breakfast should be. Literally.
So I was just telling people about this because of you. Thank you so much. Right? Understanding this information, breakfast was like my favorite indulgence, almost like real, like what I would call like real breakfast. But now I know it's not. But like, you know, pancakes, eggs, waffles, sausage and biscuits, right? Like the whole nine. Like that was like me. I was like, yes, this is what I look forward to. And then all of a sudden, I meet Kobi, and he's like, yeah, no, that's not it, man. I'm like, what? What do you mean? By the way, I haven't had breakfast food in like 2 months, bro. Like 2 months. There we go.
And you know, I appreciate you for getting new information and taking action on it, man. It's it's interrupting those patterns to learn something new. My dad told me a story a long time ago. He said there was a daughter, right, granddaughter, who was at Thanksgiving or a holiday or something, and they were cooking a ham, and the mother takes it and chops both ends of the ham off and puts it in the oven, puts it in the pot, and then puts it in the oven. And the daughter's like, "Why do you chop both ends off?" She's like, "I don't know, my mama did it." And it's like, "Go ask her." Went to the mother. Mother is like, asked the mother, why do we chop the ends off the ham to put it in? She's like, I don't know, my mother do it. So there's several generations. Go ask her. Old mother just sitting there, you know, rocking, enjoying everything. Grandma, why do we chop the ham up? It's like, what are you talking about? Why do we chop the ends off? Why do we do that? It's like, oh, I did that because my pan was small back in the day. You know, it's like simple things like that. It's like, oh, so you guys just kept chopping the ends off the ham. Now you got bigger pans. You don't have to chop the end off. You didn't even stop to just be like, oh, why do we chop the ends off the ham, right?
Never ask
why do we do this?
Never ask why.
The question of why, yeah.
I think that's a great place to end, guys, because we made it to it's been an hour. We've been jamming, but that's a great place to wrap this thing up. Ask why. If you're not asking why, you're not really critically thinking about things, right? Like if you just take everything as it is and you're not like, why is it that way? Why do we do that? Why do I feel this way? Like if you're not asking yourself why, you're probably not thinking critically enough to actually break out of this hypnotic rhythm. Guys, we're finishing this conversation on Clubhouse. By the way, special announcement for everybody listening. We are switching the day of The Good Life. It is now moving to Wednesday night. So we're here on Thursday. We're rocking out on Thursday. We're going to switch this and move to Wednesday night. So from here on out, you're going to see us Wednesday night, same time, right? 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And still right after, like right now, we're heading over to Clubhouse. Finish up the conversation over there on Clubhouse. Yeah, that way, whichever way that is. We're going over to Clubhouse, finish up the conversation. We definitely appreciate all of you. Continue to join us every Wednesday moving forward. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m. We're going to, again, continue to have these thoughtful conversations around health, wealth, love, happiness, all the things that are helping us achieve the good life. Until next week, we'll see you. Join us on Clubhouse. Go over there and join us on Clubhouse, guys. We'll talk to you next week. Take care.
Do it.